Rivaldo is one of the most iconic ballers of all time. Whether it's the bicycle kicks or the Vegeta hairline, he's one of the most recognizable faces in the history of the sport. And yet, because of his versatility, he doesn't really get spoken about in all-timer debates for any position. His awareness and instinctiveness was beyond belief. You often hear guys say, wow, this striker just knows where the goal is. But this guy, without even looking, somehow just knew where the goalkeeper was positioned. And before they could even think about diving, they're turning around to pick the ball up from the back of their net. This brother just traveled the world bagging goals and stacking trophies for both club and country like their Pokemon. Oh yeah, and he got a nice little Balon d'Or as well. Many of you may not know much about him outside of his very one-footed icon card, or if you're a little bit older, him being one of the first legends you unlock on FIFA Street. So collect your pen and paper, grab your popcorn, and I'll give you guys the full history lesson on Rivaldo, the kid who went from poverty to the top of the world. Rivaldo was born and raised in one of the most dangerous favelas in Recife from 1972. His father was unfortunately killed in a road accident in 1989 when Rivaldo was just 17, but it motivated him to go and get that professional contract that very same year at Santa Cruz. Although he appeared to be physically weak as a result of the malnourishment growing up, his debut had the coaches excited to see more of this left-footed unique talent. A spell at Mogi Miriam saw him go from strength to strength, and by this point it was clear for all to see that his level was far above the second division in Brazil, so he was sent on loan to Corinthians to be given a chance to prove himself. Chucked into the deep end, Rivaldo didn't buckle. He impressed so much that the following year, their major rivals Palmeiras swooped in to bolster their squad and ensure they win the league title for another year. When you see the kind of goals this guy was scoring from any distance, it makes sense why they were so desperate to acquire his services. He'd stay at Palmeiras for 3 years, scoring 60 goals in just 97 appearances for the club. A Campeonato Paulista trophy followed in 1996, and it earned him a call up to the Brazil Olympics team following the heartbreak of being snubbed for the 1994 World Cup just 2 years earlier. After picking up a bronze medal, it was time for a European adventure. Plenty of Italian teams and Spanish teams were doing tug of war to get Rivaldo, but it was Deportivo La Coruña who won the battle to sign him in 1996. He'd only stay for 1 year, but it was an eventful one. Their legend Bebeto leaving the club meant that Rivaldo had massive shoes to fill. A club record fee and paying him $1 million salary meant there was immense pressure on him, but he embraced it. In fact, he told the media that he's not like his other guys from Brazil. He's not going to be flying back home every weekend or showing lack of discipline like his Brazilian colleagues. He was here to just win games. It's safe to say that he backed his shot, scoring 5 goals in his first 5 matches, demonstrating fantastic flexibility to fire home with finesse or lethal strikes lashed into the net. Bear in mind he joined the mid-table team at the time. Deportivo would finish just 2 points behind Real Madrid and level on points with the mighty Barcelona. He was going toe-to-toe in the Golden Boot race with Raul and Ronaldo. 21 league goals for a guy that's not even a pure number 9 is a very impressive feat, and it had the even bigger teams on red alert. In 1997, the legendary Sir Bobby Robson decided that Rivaldo was the man to close the gap between themselves and Real Madrid. To cut a long story short, he was right. The Brazilians' 28 goals in all competitions led to a league and cup double in the 1997-98 season. The 98 World Cup saw him continue his fine goal-scoring form after he wasn't picked for the previous tournament for supposedly being too greedy. In the end, he'd scored 3 goals on the way to the final, where they were eventually defeated by France. No worries though, he was about to bounce back in style. Some of the goals this guy scored in 1999 would have you scratching your head, wondering if you're watching a PS5 game that had just bugged out completely. He'd score even more goals this season, and in his first Copa America, he'd win the entire tournament as well as the Golden Boot, scoring 5 goals and the MVP of the tournament as well. This dominance for both club and country earned him the FIFA World Player of the Year award, and of course, the Balon d'Or. United then came knocking after their treble-winning season, and his head was low-key being turned because he was getting into scraps with manager Louis van Gaal about whether or not he should be playing as a striker, as a left winger, or in the 10. Although his output lowered during this beef, he was still producing magical moments, and by the next year, he'd fly back up to the second top scorer in the entire league for the 2000-2001 season. The following year, Rivaldo decided to get into his free kick bag for the most crucial moments as well. Most notably as part of an iconic hat-trick against Valencia that had the entire stadium roaring in disbelief. Bear in mind this is the final day of the season. How dare you hit a bicycle kick from this far out to secure Champions League at the very death? 130 goals for Barcelona was already a fantastic achievement, but the crowning moment of his career was still yet to come. At the 2002 World Cup, and now 30-year-old Rivaldo would score in the first 5 games for Brazil, forming a titanic trio with Ronaldo and Ronaldinho to go all the way to the final, where he'd go and create both goals for El Fenomeno to go and win them the World Cup. After the World Cup glory, he decided to go on a new adventure to Milan. From that incredible high to a painful low. If you know Rivaldo, you're probably thinking, hold on a minute, didn't this guy win Champions League and Coppa Italia whilst at Milan? Yes, he did. But he himself was far below his usual impeccable standards. In fact, they gave him the Bidone d'Oro, an award for the worst Serie A player of the season. It's natural that despite the goals, he'd start showing signs of aging, but he was still able to show us flashes here and there before eventually going back home to Brazil in 2004. His stay in Cruzeiro was relatively short-lived as well. He only joined the club to be coached by Luxemburgo, so when he was sacked, he followed him right out that door and found himself in Greece with Olympiacos. We've all heard of the saying, form is temporary, class is permanent, and he showed that straight away in his first derby game against arch-enemies Panathinaikos, where he bagged a crazy free kick. He did it again in the Champions League against Liverpool, but unfortunately he was overshadowed by that iconic Gerrard last-minute goal that would send Olympiacos home and send Liverpool all the way to go and win the tournament by the end. Domestically, he was cooking though. 43 goals across 3 years at the club would help Olympiacos to 3 straight league titles and 2 Greek Cups, making him a legend in yet another country. Now in his mid-30s, he signed for AEK Athens in 2007 after the Olympiacos board decided he was too old for him to continue paying his wages. Rivaldo was burning, but he wasn't going to forget this quickly. He continued where he left off, scoring goal after goal and winning games almost single-handedly. In fact, when it was time to face his former employers Olympiacos, he helped them dunk on their heads 4-0 and ended up putting 4 to the camera like Arshavin. That's serious levels of petty, but when you're scoring goals of this caliber, it's understandable that you'd expect to be appreciated a little bit more. After some controversy about the way in which Olympiacos were given the title, he decided to dip and join Bunyod Court in Uzbekistan. What is a polar bear doing in Texas? I don't know. Obviously, he'd go and score a brace on his debut again, and just like back in Greece, he won 3 straight Uzbek titles, scoring 42 goals in 76 games in all competitions. His work here was done and it was time to finally return home to Brazil, where, what do you know, he'd score on his debut again, this time for Sao Paulo. Despite getting off to a good start, unfortunately his season was hampered by injuries and he took to Twitter to announce that he'd be leaving at the end of the season. The fact my man's announcing it on social media tells you how long this guy's career was going, and he still wasn't finished. His world tour led him to Africa, Angola in particular. Bro was 40 years old playing for Kabuskor and still bagging hat-tricks against their arch-rivals Recreativo Kala. I apologize, the quality of this footage may look like it's been recorded on a Nintendo DS camera, but even still you can see his quality was undeniable. He scored a respectable 11 goals in 21 games in the Girabola League before going back home to Brazil once again. Again, this is a man in his 40s now, so it's understandable that he'd be slowing down when he arrived to play for Sao Caetano. Although Father Time was catching him, he was still scoring debut goals like clockwork. And then again the following game against Atletico Bragantino. But due to persistent knee problems, he knew his hourglass was running out and he returned back to Mogi Mirim, the club where he was first given a proper chance to cook. It was a chance to create history as he came on the field to play alongside his son, Rivaldinho. Once he did that, he was happy to officially hang up his boots and close the last page on a wonderful career. Yeah, I had my outro ready, but he lied. This man just loves the beautiful game. He came back a year later at 43 now and made history again, with him and his son getting on the score sheet in the same game when Mogi Mirim defeated Makai. Now he was finished. Rivaldo would retire with 377 goals and 813 appearances across his 24-year professional career, for those of you who love the stats. If only assist numbers were counted properly back in the day, I'm sure his numbers would look crazy there too. But just in case it needed more reinforcement, 35 goals for the greatest international team ever in just 74 caps for Brazil. This man had basically anything you could wish for in a forward, except a right foot. Hopefully you guys have learned something new today. If you did, leave a like on the video, comment how much Barca Rivaldo will be worth in today's game, and subscribe for new lessons every Monday. Class dismissed. Bosh.